Economia partidei Delgado, acolo este, va fi corner, dragi ascultători.
And the weather outside is frightful. And the fire is so delightful. Oh, that's on the preamble.
That's an odd I think that's fine, yeah. That's fine.
Yeah.
So we've done the song this week. You've already heard it in the preamble. I think that's our best one yet, don't you?
Yeah.
Welcome back to Val Verde Broadcasting. Oh, it's tinsel and a Christmas hat, which has transformed the entire tenor of this episode into a festive fucking feast, fellas. Also ladies, let's not make it about gender. This week, continuing the Christmas theme, the half-hearted seasonal theme, we're going to talk about the Joe Dante film Gremlins, the original Gremlins, about which there are all kinds of things to say. I have expressed in great detail my love for Gremlins 2, which I actually prefer to this film, which I get in trouble for. But let's talk about Gremlins. Give me your overview of the film Gremlins.
Very much a film of my youth.
Yes, yes.
Something that I think, that was one of those playground things that people talk about because it had rules.
Yes,
freedom after
yes,
midnight.
yeah.
So don't give them away. That was always the thing. So, and it was one of those films I think I watched when I watched it as a kid. It was one of those like in my mind. And the same thing happened with Empire Strikes Back. It must have been in the winter, so it was like dark outside at 4:00. Right. But I thought it was like the middle of the night, and we were watching this horrible, scary, dark film. Obviously, it isn't that, but it's kind of like that. It was among the pantheon of films that kind of scared the shit out of me as a kid for no apparent reason. I just think the imagery and what was going like Edward Scissorhands, that Empire Strikes Back briefly, scared me a lot as a kid. So yeah, I guess it's in that kind of that's my kind of thing about it, and it's a film that what do they call them? The plastic. What was it called? There's a certain type of horror that like Nightmare on Elm Street fits into. I'm not calling this a horror film necessarily, but the type of horror in it is plastic something or another, plastic fantastic, plastic whatever it is.
I don't know that terminology.
But in other words, it's like practical.
Oh, okay, sure.
Like
Uh-huh.
So it's one of those. It's a great sort of in reaction to kind of the Spielbergian kids at the heart of the film. It's sort of good.
Yeah, it's an Amblin picture.
Oh right, okay,
yeah. So it's written by Chris Columbus, directed by Dante. I believe it's exec produced by Spielberg, being an Amblin joint, directed by Joe Dante, of course. Right. So it's very much in that era. It's a lot darker than anything Spielberg ever did. Yeah. Well, I say ever. I mean, that's ridiculous because there's Munich and Schindler's List and lots of serious drama. I mean, it's darker in his kind of family film kind of repertoire. It is very much. I talked about at great length before. Like Joe Dante is very rooted in the kind of 50s, 60s horror. We have a dog here.
We have our own gremlin.
The 50, 60 kind of
leave it
B-movie horror scene. And Corey Feldman and Billy Peltzer, they watch Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the original one, in the movie. So that's something that's kind of featured within it. So imagery of them watching a black and white film. It's very much a 1950s B-movie. And it has rules, and I think that's something that appeals to kids. It's a great like kiddie horror because it's a little bit bloody. Yeah, and it's got some Phoebe Cates's kind of monologue about what happened to her dad. He's entombed in the chimney dressed as Santa. Yeah, it's dark as night, and they riff on that in the second one. They kind of joke about it, but it is grim. It's absolutely horrible. One thing that me and my brother always liked was the old lady being ejected on the stand stair lift out the window. Because the horrible old lady is looking out the window. Because that's the stuff you talk about on the playground, right?
Yes, yeah.
And it's all about,
I remember people telling me about that and being quite horrified by it. And I don't know why. Again, it's something. I think it was my mate Owen who used to tell me all these gruey, nasty things because he was allowed to watch stuff that I wasn't. And that was one of the things. But it very much was that kind of thing. And I suppose more broadly, I mean, the fact it's called Gremlins, it's about, I guess, coming of age and learning that life ain't all farts and rainbows.
Farts and rainbows, yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like it's literally about life can be shit and there's gremlins. Like there's literally things that go wrong, basically.
Well, I think it is a nice coming of age thing because it's in the kind of the main couple in the film. They're both reaching a certain point in life where it turns out things, you know, I think the kind of thing running through the stick of rock of Gremlins is that loss of innocence and life is, because, you know, she works in a bar, he works in the bank, there's kind of awful, cynical people in the bank, there's shitty drunks in the bar, you know, there's kind of bad things going on in the streets, like the cops are arseholes, like, you know, his dad's this kind of failed inventor.
Yeah, there's a death of a salesman kind of vibe to a lot of Willy Loman type movie in a way, you know, but it's like tragically optimistic, you know, being slowly eaten alive by the American dream kind of thing, you know, it's that there's that element in it. Yeah, and like you say, loss of innocence, I mean, it's literally like, if you don't follow the rules, there will be consequences. There's that, and then there's the fact that, like, obviously Gizmo literally spawns like a manifestation of loss of innocence, like whatever you call it, like non-innocence, whatever. Corruption, I guess. Yeah, so it's kind of like that's. I mean, it's that sort of black and white, but then it does kind of extrapolate out, and then it's kind of however all the adults respond to stuff, and you know, and ultimately it's the kids who kind of save the day, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's very much that kind of Amblin thing, isn't it? And yeah, like no one believes the kids, much like E.T. or whatever, and grown-ups kind of being arseholes. Because Jonathan Banks plays one of the cops, which I only, in as much as he ever looked young, but like this, it's like shit, Jonathan Banks with like some hair. It's like a Dirty Shitter style. He's probably about 18, but just looks about 40. But, yeah, the cop, you know, the cops don't believe him, and the Gremlins as well, because I think the reason a lot of people don't like the second one, which I totally understand, is that the second one deliberately goes for a way lighter tone. But to me, that doesn't feel like it's selling out. It's just what Joe Dante wanted to do with it. Whereas the first one, it's pitch black in places.
I think that's necessary though when it's the first one. I think when you're setting up what Gremlins are and what's in the world of that, then it needs that, because you can't be in any doubt that this is like, because the stakes are blah. But once you get to the second one and you know what it's about, I think you can just throw that out the window, because I don't think you know, everyone knows what Gremlin is. Again, it's that thing of like, you establish the rules, so now it's...
And they deliberately take the piss out of the rules in the second one as well, crucially. There's an entire scene where they just sort of go like, oh yeah, but if you got on a plane and crossed a time zone, or if you wait before midnight and a bit of it got stuck in your tooth and you swallowed it later, does that count? And,
that was always my thing with that rule, is it's like, well, it's always after midnight.
Yeah, somewhere.
So in theory, like, up until the first midnight of existence, they could be fed, and then after that, it was like, well, when does that end?
People are incompetent enough that if Gremlins and Mogwai were a real thing, they would have dominated the Earth years ago. Because they're so fucking incompetent. You see one person gets a fucking Mogwai, and look what happens. Like, you know.
Well, it's a sort of original sin thing, isn't it? It's that kind of don't eat from the forbidden tree, don't do that thing, and then all the human can think about is doing that thing.
Yeah, don't push the red button.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of, and I suppose there's a sort of an Adam and Eve loose allegory in there. Yeah. Very loose, but there is one.
I mean, it's another one, again, Joe Dante sort of, it's about kind of B-movie horror, but it's also kind of rooted in just kind of straight up classical Hollywood. So he's kind of got little bits of It's a Wonderful Life, and, you know, any kind of Christmas movie in there. And it is, you know, and there's the argument that it's more Christmassy than Die Hard, if you like that. And it is explicitly Christmassy because it's at Christmas and it's snowy and all the rest of it. And did you know that the town is the same town from Back to the Future? It's the Universal backlot.
Right,
so Bedford Falls is also, is it Bedford Falls? I always get confused because the name of the town of this sounds a hell of a lot like the town from It's a Wonderful Life. Just like Bedford Falls, and anyway, and Hill Valley. So like the cinema is the same cinema and the main streets there and stuff. So it's
square
actually,
is, I think.
Yeah.
You can see
so
it.
If you see it shot at the right angle, it's kind of like, it's Hill Valley.
Yeah.
I think it's something in terms of it's very interesting to me that it's written by Chris Columbus, because like it's kind of this weird triptych of family-friendly directors. You got Spielberg, Columbus, and Dante, like all going in once. And then by the second one, like, you know, Chris Columbus isn't involved. Rick Baker, I'm pretty sure, did the effects for this as well. So it's kind of quite top-end effects, and all the kind of slapsticky Warner Brothers-y stuff is there, but that's what's kind of like doubled down on in the second one, and that becomes the focus of the film in the second one, which I think is why people don't like it so much. And yeah, it's very easy to forget just how sort of grim this film is, quite a lot. Because like Dick Miller and his wife, you remember them? And they come after the wife, and like it looks like those two have been killed if you leave, because I just haven't last time watched it. They're left in a kind of ambiguous way, and it's when you come to the second one and they're still about and have PTSD, it's kind of like,
right. Yeah.
you know, fine.
Yeah, it was in it. I mean, There was a run of these sorts. I mean, Arachnophobia is a film that sort of springs to mind as being kind of loosely in the same kind of.
Oh yeah,
it's with that in that rubric. I suppose.
Creature feature.
Yeah,
and Lake Placid as well. And Lake Placid also does it in that kind of arch ironic sort of way.
Yeah. So it's kind of they're and again, it's a world where like the Mogwai thing is just sort of accepted as like, when he meets it for the first time in that mystic Chinese shop, which is so kind of the Simpsons thing, isn't it? They're like, you'll be sorry, kind of, the
potassium benzoate.
Yeah. I mean, it is that guy. It's that weird,
it's exactly
sort of
that
Big Trouble in Little China, whatever. Insert. But the fact that there's just this thing there, and he's kind of fascinated by it. But at no point does he ever go, "That's never appeared in any like book or like."
What the fuck is this sentient little man bear thing that can sing and do phrases of English? Yeah. It's not like an African grey parrot where you can teach it to say bollocks. Like this thing can sit and play a little keyboard or do a little dance or whatever.
Yeah. So it's it's a sort of, it's very much, and it does set itself up as being not the real world, which enables it to do an awful lot as well, I think. It's kind of, I don't know. And what's the main character's name?
Billy Peltzer.
Billy Peltzer, that's it. Obviously his relationship with Gizmo and stuff is quite well put together, I think.
Yeah.
All that early stuff when it's just the two of them and he's in his bedroom or whatever.
And with Corey Feldman.
Yeah.
It's kind of easy to forget that Corey Feldman's in this as playing Corey Feldman character number 4752, which as he did in all of these things.
Yeah.
He's the kind of sounding board for Billy. And they're the ones that hang out and watch B movies and stuff, and they've got this cool kind of look at the Mogwai kind of relationship.
Right. Do you think the backdrop of Christmas is thematically and kind of visually about putting it against probably the most innocent time of the year?
No, it's just set at Christmas. Absolutely.
Obviously designed to make the event stand out and be even more kind of whoa.
Yeah, absolutely, I mean, it helps that kind of the backdrop is there's a snowstorm, so it kind of helps that the people are trapped in the town. But then like the concept of like birth and innocence and stuff is all baked into it and everything. And then you get to subvert all the Christmas imagery because like don't they tie Gizmo up with the Christmas lights and stuff like that, and you get all the imagery of Christmas trees and stuff being just a nice kind of thing of Christmas imagery being made infernal, like when they're hiding in the Christmas tree and stuff like that, and all the corruption of all that stuff. Which and it's tied into the whole broader thing is like you touched upon. Sounds like Death of a Salesman in The American Dream. It's all about what goes on behind the white picket fence, which is what in a completely different vein is what David Lynch was doing.
Yes.
And does. So like Blue Velvet is the same thing, and that even opens on white picket fences and stuff like that. And I think it goes to a close-up of a bunch of ants like devouring something or whatever.
Right.
It's the same thing. It's like what goes on in The American Dream in the kind of Midwestern suburbia or whatever. Like I think it's in the Midwest. I ain't got a fucking clue. I don't know about America.
I watched Arlington Road recently, quite apropos of nothing, I suppose, but that has a similar. Obviously, that's quite literally about.
It's about domestic terrorists, right? It's
It seems oddly irrelevant now because it came out just before 9/11. Really, it was like 1999, I think.
I remember when that came out. It was kind of like, what a load of far-fetched nonsense. People weren't really like into it,
but it's so it's kind of I mean, there is that sort of fascination, I think, with the kind of not trusting innocence and not when things appear that way, not believing it. And then the sort of Death of a Salesman thing, I think it goes one further because he's kind of an inventor, isn't he, as well? Like he kind of invents. Pocket
bathroom buddy.
Bathroom buddy.
Bathroom buddy, and all of his inventions are horrible nightmares. Like really bad. Like the bathroom buddy is that massive, horrible, clunky thing, and it just blorts toothpaste everywhere all the time and stuff. Isn't it? Oh, is it like a breakfast maker or an orange juice squasher in their kitchen that just blorts out everywhere? Like.
Yeah, and well, then that's it. And obviously, then there's his wife's frustration with all this crap that's lying around the house that doesn't work and catches fire. But then because then they use them as weapons essentially against the Gremlins like later on, and it's like, oh, okay, so there's a really daft redemptive kind of arc for it. It's like, I knew this would come in handy.
In these insanely specific circumstances, I knew this would come in handy.
If you need to blend a gremlin,
yes. Oh, those are the playground bits, aren't they?
Oh, definitely.
Play Gremlin in a blender, Gremlin in a microwave, and you can sort of enjoy it because it's just they're little dicks and they deserve it.
Yeah. It's sort of vignette-like as well in the way that it kind of. There was a lot of that. I remember again. It's even when you talk about things like Jaws. In that one, it gets electrocuted, and that one it gets blowed up. In that one, it's that sort of like this time this happens. And Gremlins managed to do that really well. And within itself, there's little set pieces effectively of like puppets getting blown up.
Yeah.
So it sort of gets to be consequence-free in a way.
It's not. The second one's very good at that as well. In that, like, those puppets are really, firstly, just really well articulated puppets, but they're really slimy.
Yeah.
And when they bleed green. So like when they do get the various ways they get blown up or squashed or electrocuted, it's really tactile. Like with the one that gets blended, it's just kind of like, that's what that would look like. And like the one that blows up, it's like, ooh, it's all green. And this, the first and the second one end up with a kind of big area of gremlin sludge, don't they?
Yeah.
I think it's a swimming pool in the first one,
That's
and then
right.
it's the hole in the second one. I don't know. They feel really real. Tons of personality in them as well.
Yeah.
They really lean into that in the second one with like the brainy gremlin is just one of the best characters ever. We talk about the first movie.
Yeah.
Like there's different nice little details. And like when they're in the cinema and they're all like smoking and being like, because they're like the worst cinema goers. Little shit. And this has them. Billy and what's her name are behind the screen in the cinema. So there's kind of like, it's like Joe Dante doing Matinee. There's kind of like examining the means of exhibition and stuff like that in a very kind of soft touch way, but it's all it's all there. The movie Joe Dante does good kind of movies about movies.
Definitely.
And going back to the Suburbia thing, that's the entirety of The Burbs is the examination of kind of the dark side of American suburbia and kind of comfortable life and whatnot.
Hot not. Do you think? I mean, it's interesting how it kind of it was in that. To me, anyway, it kind of fit into that. Oh, I probably just touched my mic. Apologies. It was in that thing of like batteries not included, the Flight of the Navigator. Like,
so batteries not included. That's another Amblin one.
Yeah. So it's that sort of kids and fantasy stuff. It's interesting how, though it is very much of that era and is sort of regarded in the same kind of pantheon as certain things, it hasn't fallen prey to the kind of let's remake it, let's make a sequel 30 years later.
I hate to do this. We're losing you a bit. Can you?
Sorry.
It's because of the Doug.
Sorry.
Sorry to do that. I'm not going to edit that out. It's funny that they used the Gremlins for a BT advert with Peter Jones. Did you ever see that?
I don't know, but I can imagine.
It was, there's a BT, so in this country, British Telecom, there's a BT advert with Peter Jones, who's from Dragon's Den, which is the American version of Shark Tank or whatever. It's all based on a Japanese thing anyway.
Takeshi's Castle.
Takeshi's Castle, yeah. They did a Gremlins advert with him. I wonder how much, say, maybe Joe Dante has on it, because it's Warner's, that they could have done it ages ago. They never did, because like Back to the Future's never been done, and I think that's down to Zemeckis and Gale's ownership of it more than anything else, because I think they could have just sequelized that whenever, so they must have some kind of say at an executive level.
Yeah.
And I sort of wonder about, because Gremlins, I'm sure it's been floated about, and it is dying for it. All they need is, you can imagine some piss week kind of remake of Gremlins.
CGI fucking Gremlins, right? And then at this point, it's almost like they're going, no, we did them all puppets, and it's like then that would feel disingenuous. It's like,
it's because it's one of those things that I would have got on board. Like it's like the new Star Wars movies use more puppets. It's really great, but it's sort of like they want to be rewarded for something they took away from you and have now given back.
Yeah.
It's sort of like, look, we're letting you have water now. And you're like chained to a radiator going, oh, wow, did you hear that, guys? We're getting water! Like, it's kind of...
It's just leave them be. I mean, I really don't... we've said this a billion times on this channel. It's just that thing of like, leave them. I mean, it's smart that they haven't done that. I think that Hollywood is starting to recognise that these properties being wrung dry isn't what people want. And these should hopefully be spared that treatment rather than doubling down and drilling down into their back catalogue, because and it's especially the other thing as well about like a lot of like Disney, for example, buying up a lot of these like 20th Century Fox and stuff like that. It is for the back catalogue, but it's not for the reasons that I think it's not to try and remake those films or try and use those characters or anything like that. It's purely because they've got their own streaming service.
Well, that's why now Disney Plus will have, for example, Die Hard, which is discussed, or like Fight Club. Yeah. Or, you know what I mean? Like all these things that are under the rubric of 20th Century Fox.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's hard to know with this one, and this one has the kind of this has the soft reboot built into its DNA, really, because you don't need to press the reset button, but you also don't need to have any of the original characters because the point is about the Gremlins. I think the one you would have to have probably is Mowgli, by which I mean Gizmo.
Mowgli.
So I don't know.
From the
Jungle Book. From the Jungle Book. Yeah. It's Rudyard Kipling's Gremlins. You will be a gremlin, my son.
The king of the swingers. Give me the power of man's red flower.
I forgot that.
Gremlins. Ow.
Ow. Christopher Walken.
Don't get him wet.
Christopher Walken as Mr.
Because he's King Louis in the
thing, the
right?
strange casting.
Yeah. Anyway, that's not what we're here to do.
Anyway, you'd have to put Gizmo in it because Gizmo exists as a standalone marketing juggernaut because they were able to slap Gizmo on all kinds of shit, and it's like the baby Yoda that's in The Mandalorian, it seems. That's all over the internet. Because it's like a cutesy-wootsy thing. People are losing their fucking shit for it. Right. And that's going to be on little suckers in people's car windows soon when they get their, test of war as far as that goes. So you would have to have Gizmo in it, I suppose. Or another... They would probably do a film where it's set in 2019 and Gizmo's been missing for 50 years, and it's the start of a trilogy.
He's been in exile.
Oh, for fuck's sake! And
here's the thing. Here's how you make it about. Here's how you talk about cinema within that. You make it allegorical of these franchises being away for so long and then being milled, and it's like Gizmo is basically this sort of paw put upon, like wherever he goes, because of his interaction with humans, carnage ensues. So he's sort of taken himself out of the game. So, I know it's really silly.
Ken Loach's Gremlins 3.
Kind of. I mean, because that's the only comment you can really make at that point. It's like these things were kind of
I think
through that lens.
Joe Dante's the one to do it because the point of Gremlins 2 is the whole point of Gremlins 2 is like you shouldn't go back to the well. Yeah. Sequels are stupid. Yeah, and then he made a film about how sequels are stupid. And I think that's what people object to because the first Gremlins had quite a serious tone. Yeah. And Gremlins 2 deliberately pisses all over it because he didn't want to do it and he said, I'll only do it if you let me do whatever I want, and they agreed. Yeah. Right? So it's a film about film, as I've said before. Episode on this channel, you go check it out. If someone was I would love if Joe Dante come back and just did did it again for an updated audience. So that's the only way I would take this because Gremlins is a great venue. It transpires to comment on stuff. For example, Daniel Clamp was modelled on Donald Trump and he was initially quite villainous. But I think when John Glover came in, they were kind of like, well, he's still like Donald Trump in terms of his business interests and standing in society, but he's kind of like this naive sort of... Gremlins 3... Daniel Clamp's president, right? Yeah. That's your lazy, kind of satirical in. Daniel Clamp's president, maybe there's some kind of gremlin legislation or something and you can sort of fuck about with that. Dante's the man to do it, I think. Yeah. I mean, let's stop
pitching that though, because we don't want it to happen.
Stop having ideas about it because we're actually... The point is, never do that. Is the point. I don't care who does it, but if you had to have it, it would need to be commenting on something. You know what I mean? Our own Gremlin is just having a little fit. I heard...
He'll just be there, we said. He won't budge. He won't. We said. As soon as you turn, there he is.
Oh well. I once heard, and it's one of these annoying things, I said this once on a podcast, and someone in the comments went, no, that's not true, but didn't then explain why it wasn't true. I heard that, because Roald Dahl is supposed to have coined the term Gremlins, and I think he was a pilot in the RAF or something. Because I know he's Norwegian, is he? But he was coming here. He coined that term, it seems, and he used it for when things were going wrong with aircraft. So supposedly, and maybe the hive mind internet can try and verify this, but he supposedly came up with the term Gremlin, and then it just became widely used parlance, and it's like, I've come up with a good term, I better copyright it immediately. So supposedly it's got a kind of a root in Roald Dahl, who's very, very famous here. Matilda was based on Roald Dahl's book, Fantastic Mr. Fox. Spielberg did a BFG film. I'm not sure if Roald Dahl gets the play, for example, in the States that he does here. Because in here, he's like an integral part of people's childhoods at a certain age.
I believe so. I mean, certainly I know Hollywood has grabbed a bunch of
3 movies, there's probably more that I just can't think of.
There's Witches.
Oh, the Witches, of course, yeah.
There's James the Giant Peach was amazing.
James the Giant Peach. Okay, maybe I'm just wrong.
Yeah, there's quite a few, I think.
I want them to make a film with I want to make a film with George's Marvellous Medicine. That was my favourite, which is essentially a whimsical story about a boy poisoning his nan.
The Twits was my favourite.
Oh,
the Twits is classic.
I fucking love the Twits, man. I was all about when they she. Or does he do it to her? He glues a penny to a cane every day, so she thinks she's shrinking.
Yeah. And then does he do it to all the furniture?
Yes, he shrinks all the furniture. Makes the furniture bigger. There's also sticking the things to the ceiling. My mum used to always call my dad Mr. Twit because there's a whole passage about him having cornflakes in his beard and stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah, just really really grimy and vile. A lot of his stuff, which is kind of great. So and this is tying that back. This is kind of what Gremlins is. It does, whether or not Joe Dante was in it, or Chris Columbus, I suppose, in any way conscious of that, and whether or not it's true, it has that kind of like grim children's stories thing. And horror for Christmas is something we talked about here before.
It goes back to like Straw Peter and all that kind of stuff, So that kind of that there's always been that element of, because it's cautionary, isn't it? You need that element of horror when you're telling a kind of moral tale for kids, because there needs to be a cautionary. If you stick your finger in that,
you stick your finger in that gremlin. It's kind of horror stories for Christmas, which has been a thing since forever, which Toby and I talked about once as well, and it fits into that tradition. But I think it's a great kind of it's a good kids horror movie.
Definitely.
But it took quite good, because I watched it with I was laid up last Christmas. So I was at home for a month, and I sat and watched Gremlins with my mum one night, because it's something we would all watch together. Because it was funny, it was grim and it was funny, and it was a little bit scary. And the first time you see it when you're 5 or whatever, it's scary. But when you watch it when you're 6 or 7, it's funny, and you've got used to it and whatever, and the rest of it. And it's kind of, it does share a few things with, for example, E.T. There's like particularly the stuff with the science lab and whatnot in the school, and the elements of it that are set in the school, and these children encountering these creatures and stuff. But I always liked it more than E.T. because E.T. is a great movie. Even as a kid, it was a bit like, fuck, this is a bit sappy, isn't it? You know what I mean?
I used to find E.T. quite boring, to be honest. I used to sit there and you'd have to sit through all the sappy stuff, or all the even just kids in a bedroom talking about it. It's brilliantly observed. And now, obviously, I think it's great. But at the time, I remember as a kid being like, But then I'd be like, why isn't Superman in it? Or something,
There are dipshit reasons not to like it as a kid. But then there's slightly better reasons to not like it as an adult. I mean, I haven't watched it in ages, but it's even then it was sort of a bit sappy, and it was kind of like, fair. You know what I mean? Fuck you, E.T. There you go. There's the E.T. episode in 5 seconds. I don't mean that. E.T. will always be the film that dicked over the thing, though. So
that's true. It almost informed Schwarzenegger's Terminator performance as well. Do you remember he said there's that stupid story when he was like, I'd just seen E.T. and they said to James Cameron, maybe they do a scene with the Terminator, he drinks a little bit of alcohol and then he gets a bit smashed. And he was like, don't tell me how to do my Terminator movie, whatever. And it's just like,
congratulations, Arnold.
That Terminator 3.
That's the worst idea ever. Good work, Arnold.
That's what happens when you let him decide.
Well, when you put beer in your toaster and your toaster gets drunk. The toast comes out upside down.
It's like, where are my car keys? Where's the toaster? Just this series of smashed into bins down the street.
Yes.
The Little Toaster. There's that film, The Little Toaster?
Yeah. There you go. That's the grim sequel. Well, there's a wrap up. As I've probably said, I don't know what order we're going to release these in, but we're done announcing all the social media. It's down there. Support us if you want. New shows every Monday. Monday is a fun day. It comes after Sunday. If you're on Patreon, you get it all 2 days earlier. Isn't that a true fact? All these episodes of It Ain't Broke. So, Merry Christmas. That's probably soon. Maybe it's already happened and I didn't release this in time. Who's to say? We'll see you next time here. Goodbye. Support your 7th or 8th favourite YouTube channel by buying crap, tat, junk, hogwash and filth at redbubble.com/people/Val Verde Shop.